Hello. Today I'm going to read the book called The Harmony Tree, A Story of Healing and Community by Randy Woodley, illustrated by Ramone Romero, Afterword by Walter Brueggemann. The author dedicates this book to my grandchildren, and to yours, and to theirs. I have been waiting for you all these years, waiting for you to see me, to hear this call song. I am not the only one that needs help here. The sharing of my country with us defines your humanity. You need us as much as I need you. Lee Maracle, Stolo, from Buffalo Shout, Salmon Cry. Not long ago, there lived a vast grove of ancient trees. The tops of their crowns reached so high that they tickled the clouds. Their branches stretched so wide that you had to spin around to see them all. The tips of their roots furrowed so deep that they touched the purest streams of underground water. Life in the great forest was happy. The ancient trees protected the younger ones from growing too fast and provided plenty of food and shelter for many creatures. Everyone, from the ruffed grouse and the black bear to the white-tailed deer and milk snake, lived in harmony and balance. But one day, without warning, everything changed. The trees heard a frightful, terrible noise. It was a noise unlike any that they had heard before. It was loud. It was rough. It buzzed like 1,000 wounded bumblebees. And then the noise did the unimaginable. One after the other, trees fell to the ground. First, it was the smaller ones. Their cries echoed throughout the forest, but the ancient trees could not stop the horrible sound. Soon after, the old trees were cut down too, falling quietly from the clouds and then crashing to the ground. The ancient ones fell and fell and fell until there was only one tree left standing. She was an ancient grandmother oak, and she did not know why she had been spared. Grandmother Oak waited for the terrible sound to come again. Day after day, she wondered when she would fall. Years went by, and Grandmother Oak's only comfort was remembering the years she shared with her friends and relatives in the ancient forest. All alone, Grandmother Oak longed for the grove to be filled again with young oak saplings. Each autumn, she would drop acorns from her branches. But when the seeds turned to young trees, the terrible noise returned, and the trees once again fell. After many years of trying, Grandmother Oak's acorns stopped falling to the ground. She felt like she was dying, no longer able to encourage new growth. Many long years passed before Grandmother Oak saw another tree. Then one day, square houses started appearing, each surrounded by a fence. And strangely, to her surprise, trees suddenly appeared in front of each house. There was something odd and unfamiliar about the new trees. They were certainly vibrant and beautiful, but they looked different. They did not grow from seeds, as far as Grandmother Oak could tell. When they appeared, they were all well on their way to adulthood. Even though the new trees were so unusual, Grandmother Oak was thrilled to be able to talk to another tree again. "Welcome to your new home," she exclaimed. "New home?" one of the trees replied. "This isn't our new home. We have been here for a long time." "Yes, this land has always been our home," said another tree. The new trees talked to each other about the old grandmother tree and how strange she seemed. Hurt by their words, Grandmother Oak became silent. The new trees grew fast. It was astonishing how quickly they shot up. But it was too fast. When storms came, they couldn't bend with the winds, and their branches often broke. Sometimes the young trees blew completely over because their roots were so shallow. When a tree was damaged, the other trees would wait anxiously. They had heard stories about what happened to injured trees, that they were always replaced with new ones. There was no time for the trees to heal. When clouds gathered and skies darkened, the new trees cried and wondered who would be the next to break. After years of silent watching, Grandmother Oak decided to speak. "Friends, you need deeper roots to be strong." "Deeper roots?" asked one of the young trees. "How do we get deeper roots?" Grandmother Oak answered, "Tell me the stories that connect you to this land." The young trees thought to themselves. They were startled. Many had stories from faraway places. Some had stories that spoke of old and new lands, but none had stories that went far, far into this ground. None of them had stories of how this land came to be, stories that told the power of this place, stories of how the Creator was behind and inside it all. Eventually, a few of the trees became curious about the old oak tree. "Grandmother Oak, do you know the stories of this land? Can you tell us what makes your roots so strong?" Grandmother Oak smiled and began to speak about the ancient forest she knew so well. She started with the recent past and those dark days when her friends and family fell to the terrible noise. The cries of those trees were still a faint echo, and now that the new trees were listening, they too could hear them. Grandmother Oak then spoke of the happy days when her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren surrounded her, all the way back to 12 tree generations. She shared about the old trees that spent their mornings listening to the songbirds that landed on their branches. Flocks of passenger pigeons stopped on their migration and roosted for the night. Herds of woodland buffalo and elk took turns grazing on the grasses that grew between them. Grandmother Oak recalled how the ivory-billed woodpecker dug for insects on her branches. And how golden eagles sat on her highest limbs at dusk, watching for their supper. The young trees leaned in to listen and could almost feel their roots slowly reaching down to find new streams of water. They stretched a little taller as they heard tales of the ancient forest. Grandmother Oak's stories seemed as if they could go on forever, and they would have without interruption, but something happened. All the trees heard the faint sound together. A soft thump had hit the ground. "What was that?" asked the young trees. "Don't worry, friends," said a joy-filled Grandmother Oak. "One of my acorns just dropped to the earth." They all smiled together as they thought about the seeds of new growth. Grandmother Oak's branches stretched out, tickling the clouds. She could feel a gurgle of sap bubbling up inside her, reaching all the way from her strong roots to the tips of her tiny twigs. Cool nights and her changing colorful leaves told her that autumn was on its way, a time to rest, stand tall, and hope for the future of the whole forest once again. You can pause here if you'd like to read the Afterword for Parents, Grandparents, and Older Ones from Walter Brueggemann. I would like to read the psalm that he quotes. He says the psalmist describes people of faith in this way. They are like trees planted by streams of water. I'm going to pause here so you can read the Afterword for Parents, Grandparents, and Older Ones, if you wish. I do want to read the psalm that he quotes. He says, the psalmist can describe people of faith in this way. They are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in their season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. Psalm 1:3. So this is written by Walter Brueggemann. And you can also press pause here if you'd like to read about the author, Randy Woodley, or the illustrator, Ramone Romero. Thank you for joining me today for this book. I wonder what your favorite part was. I wonder what part of the story seems most important. I wonder where you might be in this story, or what part is especially for you today. I wonder what we can learn from the place we find ourselves in the story. I wonder if this story reminds us of anything else that we've encountered in our lives or other stories that we've heard.